I'm going to give you a little bit of an account of the consequences for us, the lessons learned, if you will, from opening up our databases. I come from the part of the bank, the Development Data Group, that compiles the World Bank's major international databases and, first of all, makes them available internally in the bank. So, if you will, the bank works at all three levels of sort of information. First of all, we create information ourselves. We produce data, and probably more importantly, we work with developing countries to improve their statistical systems so that the data that they're producing are more reliable. We don't do that alone. We do that in partnership with many other international organizations, including the UN, and also many bilateral donors. For example, the British Department for International Development has been very keen on improving the quality of statistics produced in developing countries, and they've funded a lot of our work. We also, of course, as I said, are data consumers and users, and our staff use these databases that we compile in their work. But our more important role may be, and we're just discovering this, as data intermediaries. We bring the data together and we make it available to many other people who are using it. When we decided to open up the bank's databases to make them available free and without restrictions, and we made that decision only last February, so we're talking about 9 months ago. We realized at the same time that we were going to have to change our way of interacting with our data users. Up till then, we figured we had about 4 million people in the world who were licensed to access our data through licensing arrangements mostly with universities and corporations. And we knew that about 140,000 people had actually accessed those databases. So they were not hidden, but they were really not very friendly. They were intended for rather elite users. And now we're going to just open them up to the world. So we really had to think about how do we use it. And we proceeded, first of all, to open them up, to change the whole model in which they're represented, from subscriptions to free, providing full downloads of data, eliminating all the other restrictions except asking attribution, and going from just purely English to multiple languages with Russian and Chinese still to come, to make them really effectively searchable, and to create a new data catalog that would help people find just the wealth of information that exists. So as I said, we needed to think about new ways of approaching the data. We thought about an indicator view, a country view, a view by topic, and then back to the massive data catalog. If I had more time, of course, I'd walk you through and show you all those different views of the data system. But what we're going to do is move on quickly. Again, we got a huge burst of attention when this happened, and many people came in and said, you know, at last the data that belong to the people, that have been paid for by the people, are being made available to the people. We were very happy to hear that. There was a lot of Twitter feed on this, and just some, you know, real enthusiasm. And then you see the big bounce. So that was our old site, about 5,500 unique visitors a day. There you see April 20th with the release of the new site, this big burst up to 30,000. It falls off, of course, but it's actually remained pretty much at that new elevated level ever since, and you'll see a slide of that further on. This has had a big impact on the organization because suddenly now the World Bank's databases are the primary reason people are coming to the World Bank data site. And everybody else in the organization knows that. They're a little jealous, but they're also pleased that there's a lot of spillover effect from people seeking data and then stopping to find out more about what the World Bank is doing. Some lessons. First of all, the important lesson is know your audience. So that's why we went into multiple languages. There's Arabic. We are still seeing only fairly small responses from the other language feeds, but we know it's worthwhile, and we know that we're going to learn more about our audience by putting it into their languages. Release the tools we're using. We're making our website information, the tools we develop for managing that website, accessible to others who want to do the same thing. So the World Bank API, for example, is available. Reach out to communities. We held a big event in October where we did a 24-hour feed, some of it live, some of it, yes, moderated and so forth. It was a lot of fun. We got a lot of new people involved. We got a lot of feedback from that. Provide a feedback loop. This is very important. We have a page, or we have a button on the page where anybody who finds any problem at all with our data can send it back to us, and we respond to those feedbacks. A very important step. What we're missing, I'll just tell the audience, is we still don't have an effective internal tool for synthesizing all that feedback we get. We respond one lesson at a time, but when I ask, well, okay, we've now had 1,000 responses, what are the categories they fall into? How do we interpret this stuff? We're still not very good at that. Collaboration. Even before the launch of the full free data set, we'd begun to collaborate with Google, who were interested in finding new ways of presenting data in public. And they certainly do things better than we do. They've actually translated our whole data set now into 40 languages and are prepared to respond in those all 40 of those languages when people come in seeking data. Track and share metrics. I think you all are probably well versed in that. Now this is just an interesting slide because that little blip over there, that spike that goes back up almost to the first day coverage, was entirely driven by an article that appeared in the Los Angeles Times, which somewhat, I think, raffishly said, well, where would Americans want to go if they wanted to hide their money or find a good tax shelter? And then they cited data from the World Development Indicators showing marginal tax rates across the globe. Well, boom, everybody wants to go in and see where that data came from. I hope what they saw, and this is actually an important issue for us, is that that data actually came from PricewaterhouseCoopers, who gave us permission to reprint it in the WDI. So when we talk about attribution, it's not just so much that we want publicity for what we've done, but it's very important to the people, whether it's the World Health Organization or the International Telecommunications Union or PricewaterhouseCoopers, that they get credit for producing the data. It's also important because when people want to find out more about how that data was produced, they need to be able to go back to those sources and investigate further. But in any case, we got a lot of attention. We're also looking at new ways of viewing our own data. The current initiative, which some of you may have heard about, is we're going under the title of Mapping for Results. And one of our first steps is to geocode and then map bank project sites and to relate the location of those sites to characteristics of the country. So here we've got a map where the coloring represents districts that have been represent poverty rates in districts. I think we're looking at Kenya here, and then bank project sites. Bolivia. Oh, thank you. I can't even read the words on this screen. I can only see the outline.
Can you just tell us just what are the pluses and what we just did? What do the pluses think?
You know, I would have to go online. They're representing different sectors of investment. So I can't read the key myself up here. It's not whether it's a good site or a bad site. That just somebody arbitrarily took that as a symbol. You can sort of guess that the water drops are water projects and so forth. Pluses probably are health projects, and I'm not sure.
The pluses are multiple projects that you have going on in those areas, and the telephone is a communications project trying to bring in communication efforts. But the really good part about this is you can go out there and see this. So let's get back, instead of those icons, let's get back to your talk. This is really interesting.
Yeah, no. And Joey had the advantage of hearing a version of this talk from my colleague Neil Phantom in Washington at the beginning of the week.
To see what was there. Stealing ideas is okay in this environment. That's why it's open.
But this has raised, this has caused a lot of excitement inside the bank, because suddenly country directors and managers and our executive directors who represent our member countries at the bank are all extremely interested in being able to see where the bank is working and what it's doing and how well the locations of our projects correlate with the need in the country. The information is not perfect by any means, and the locational information is probably the most imperfect of all, but it's provided at least now a driving force to improve that. And then finally, invite others to innovate with our data. So in October, as part of that whole 24-hour show we ran, we announced our contest, Apps for Development, that many of you have heard about. I have a couple posters I'll try to stick up on the wall around here today as a further reminder of that. It's open to anyone, and it will be running through the 10th of January is the closing date for submissions. The only requirements for it are that you find some innovative, interesting way of utilizing World Bank data to help people better understand the Millennium Development Goals. Now, those are very broad words. Understand can really mean anything. World Bank data can mean anything, and you're also welcome to combine it. In fact, you're encouraged to combine it with data from other sources. The thing we'd most like to see is, in fact, people bringing new data in, linking it, mashing it up with our data to help people understand what have been the successes, the failures, what are the gaps, what are the needs, where are we going to be in 2015 when the Millennium Development Goals fall due. And so my last slide, and I'll just leave it there so you can read it. This was from a speech that our president, Bob Zullett, gave a couple of weeks ago, where he tried to imagine, and I think this is really imagination on his part, where you might go if you really had full, complete access, not only to data, but to tools for using the data to research results from that data that help you understand the consequences. And then finally to just a broader community of knowledge that would make that data really, really useful. So that's his vision for the future. And thank you very much.